So if you had to choose one part of running, either running intense or running higher volume, which would you choose? Or let me put it this way, if you wanted to get better, would you run with more intensity or would you increase your volume, but keep those higher volume runs at a lower intensity? That's what we're going to be talking about, and you might actually be surprised at the results. But without a doubt, the best thing about the topic that I'm going to be speaking to you about and the study that I'm going to be sharing is that it leaves a lot of room for questions. There are a lot of caveats to this study and the results that they suggest. And that's what I really love getting into with you guys. Oh, and this also is the weekly running and training vlog where the main purpose of this video is for you to tell me about your week of running. I want to hear about your successes and definitely want to hear about those setbacks. So I did come across an article in Trail Runner magazine written by David Roche, and it talks about a new study. And in this new study, they took participants, they pitted them against another set of participants, and they sought to find out which would make athletes better or faster. That's generally how we measure betterness. So one of the groups of participants ran with a higher intensity, the other group of participants ran with a higher volume. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So if you've been watching this channel for a while, or you are just familiar with the running science studies that are going on all the time, then you know that this year there was an article that identified that the best athletes in the world train between 450 to 700 hours a year, with over 80% of those hours, and often more like 90% of those hours, being at a very low intensity. We're talking easy running, guys. And we've all had it beat into us more than enough that the bulk of our miles should be easy. And actually going back a few years, there was a study in 2019 that showed that the volume of easy running had the highest correlation with performance. You heard me right. Those athletes that ran the most at a low intensity performed better. I hope I'm not giving too much away of this study. But let's get right into this study, because that's what you want to hear about. It's very recent. It was published at the end of May. So this study recruited 30 participants. So they were separated into two groups, and in each group we had 9 men and 6 women. Now the average 3K time for these athletes was 12 minutes and 30 seconds, which is about an average of a 6-minute 42-second mile. So these participants were no slouches. They're pretty strong runners. So before the intervention, all the athletes went under a 2-week time of preparation. And during this 2-week prep period, the runs consisted of mostly easy runs, but all the athletes did do a short interval section of 6 times 3 minutes at their maximal sustainable effort. And then they had 2 minutes recovery in between each interval. Okay, so in this 2-week prep period, we have mostly easy running and then 1 set of intervals. After the 2-week prep time, we had 1 week of recovery, and during that week of recovery, all the athletes dropped their volume by 50%. Now we get to the intervention. This is when the athletes were separated into their 2 groups, higher volume, higher intensity. Now during the intervention, the participants in the intensity group ran 10 workouts of 6 times 3 minutes, just like they did in the prep. Now for the intensity group, obviously they warmed up before they went into these intervals. They had 2 minutes recovery in between each interval, and then they ran a short cool down. So this is pretty intense. We're talking 5 interval sessions a week for 2 weeks. The participants in the higher volume group increased their weekly volume by 70%. That's a pretty big jump in volume. After the 2-week intervention, all the athletes did a time trial. They did the same 3-kilometer time trial, and then they went into a week of recovery where they dropped their volume by 50%. After the 2-week intervention, all the participants did another 3K time trial, and then they had a recovery week. At the end of the recovery week, they did another 3-kilometer time trial. Now, as well as just tracking their times, the researchers also tracked the athletes' heart rate variability, their RPE, which is their rate of perceived exertion, and they took blood and urine samples. So the intensity group actually had a pretty similar training volume before and during the intervention, and it worked out to about 5.5 hours a week. However, because of the faster running during the intervention for the intensity group, their total volume actually increased from about 45 kilometers up to about 50 kilometers. The athletes in the group with increased volume, they increased that volume from about 5.4 hours a week all the way up to 9 hours a week. And with the volume group, the researchers figured out that 99.6% of their running was at a very low easy effort. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Oh, and also, if you are enjoying this video, perhaps if you're learning something new or you are just entertained, it'd be great if you could hit that like button, and if you're not already, consider subscribing. It really helps me and helps the channel. So personally, I think the athletes in the intensity group would be the ones to see a huge jump in performance. And that's because it's kind of like speed work that we do before a big event. Maybe not as much as the intervention did, but when we're coming up to a race, we really sharpen the spear and we increase that speed work. And then we taper and we soak up all that goodness from the training and the fast work that we've been putting in, and then we crush it on race day. So let's talk results. So remember, we did a 3K time trial before in order to get a baseline. We did a 3K time trial after the 2-week intervention. Then we did another 3K time trial after the 1 week of recovery. So from the baseline 3K to the post-intervention 3K, the runners who increased their intensity ran that 3K 13 seconds faster. The runners that increased their volume ran the second 3K 11 seconds faster. So the athletes in the intensity group averaged out, ran 2 seconds faster than those in the volume group. Now, if we look at the 3K time trial between the baseline and after the week of recovery at the end, the athletes in the intensity group ran 19 seconds faster, and the athletes in the higher volume group ran 17 seconds faster. Again, the athletes in the intensity group ran 2 seconds faster. But here's the thing, those results are not statistically significant. And that's important. And you might be thinking, well, Matt, they still ran 2 seconds faster. But if it's not statistically significant, it doesn't really count. Because when we extrapolate that out to a population, there won't be a difference. But there are some other results that came out of this study. It was found that the athletes in the intensity group reported higher muscle soreness. And also the athletes' perceptual reports of their readiness to train and perform actually increased in the volume group. So what that means is that the athletes that were running a higher volume actually felt ready to perform and run fast, whereas the athletes in the intensity group were probably too tired. And while the researchers found that fatigue was very similar between the intensity and the volume group, the stress of the intensity group was higher than that of the volume group. And that was shown in the heart rate variability data. It actually increased in the volume group and decreased in the intensity group. So guys, what do you think? Well, let me know your opinions of this study. Let me know if you think it is a valid study, or are there too many questions that this study raises. Now, David Roche brings up a great observation in that this study was so short. It was only a 2-week intervention period. And he also pointed out that all the athletes did those 6 times 3 minute intervals before the study began. So with that in mind, the athletes that increased their volume also had the benefit of doing speed work just a couple weeks before. And that could actually affect their neuromuscular and biomechanical adaptations to actually run fast. It's likely that if we only ran easy for an entire year, we would lose those same adaptations to run fast. And also, running really is a long-term sport. We know that we get better over time. In fact, I've seen several reports that show that a runner will improve for 5 to 7 years after they start running. Some reports have said that runners can improve up to a decade after they start running. Roche also points out that because it was just a 2-week study, it probably records a lot of noise in the data. And that is, there are a lot of other individual variables that come to the surface when the study is so short. Stuff like illnesses, life stresses, training backgrounds, small injuries. Those could all pose small confounds to the variables being measured. And it's likely that if we did the same study over time, then those confounds would kind of get ironed out. But of course, if we did expand that study over time, the athletes in the intensity group probably find themselves getting overtrained and would probably have a higher prevalence of injury. Doing that much speed work for a long time seems like a recipe for disaster. You know what? I really like this study. I like that it supports the notion that running easy is highly beneficial for me running. I think it points out that there is a benefit to running faster in order to keep those neuromuscular and biomechanical adaptations that come with running fast. But for the most part, this is more support that running easy is good for us and benefits our running. And as someone that enjoys running slow, I like to hear it. One more thing that I think the study also brings to light is that, as in everything, moderation is key. The athletes that were in the intensity group did a lot of intensity. If they did this study any longer than 2 weeks, as I said, they would probably get injured. Also, the volume group. Increasing their volume by 70% is a big jump. If they continued with that volume, they also would likely get injured. So I think ultimately, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Moderation, running a lot of easy miles, running a few fast miles. And with that, that's pretty much how my week went. I had a good week of running last week. Started off on Monday with 11.04 miles, very easy, because Tuesday was a workout day. And on Tuesday, I ran a total of 10.3 miles, and I started off nice and easy with 3 miles to warm up. Then I did 6 800s with 400 meters recovery in between, and then I cooled down for 3 miles afterwards. Wednesday was actually my day off this week, so I got to put my feet up, kind of, did some other stuff. Then on Thursday was another workout day. I knocked out a total of 8.2 miles with 2 miles to warm up, followed by 5 miles at tempo pace, and then I cooled down for 1.2 miles. Guys, gotta tell you, pretty warm this time of year. And holding on to that tempo pace for 5 miles just isn't easy. But I did it, and then on Friday, I knocked out 11.2 miles, very easy. And you know what, I was pretty happy about running those easy miles on Friday, because on Saturday was a little harder than I expected. Now, Saturday was my long run of the week. I went down to Sarasota, I met up with my buddies Tyler, Johnny, and Brian, and the goal of the day was to run long. And we actually knocked out 16.1 miles, so I was pretty happy with that. But we also included 2 miles at a little faster pace. So most of the run was done at a very easy pace, but on mile 3 and mile 13, we increased the pace up to a 7-minute per mile pace. And naturally, the first one wasn't too bad, kind of easy actually. But I gotta say, after running 13 miles, dropping the hammer in order to get that pace up to a 7-minute mile, it was a bit of a challenge. But then of course we had 2 miles to cool down, and I actually felt pretty good that day. I mean, I was tired for the rest of the day, but I felt pretty good. Sunday, I wrapped up the week with 9 miles. I went back down to downtown Sarasota, and I met up with my local running group, the Suncoast Milers, and we knocked out 9 miles very easy, just out to Lido, Key and back. And that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun just meeting people and talking the whole time. That really isn't something that I get to do a lot. So that brought my week's total to 65.88 miles, which is about 106 kilometers. So all in all, pretty good week. I'm pretty happy with how this week went. Now guys, don't forget, let me know about your week of running. Successes and setbacks. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.